So what I'm going to do here is just talk you through the interpretation of a profile. I'm doing this with the mindset that this is the first time a student has seen their profile, and we've got maybe 15 minutes. And they're year 10, thinking about subject options and, more importantly, what they plan to do when they leave school. So let's start on the aptitudes page. The first thing I notice here is that the bulk of the scores are in very high 90% plus range. So probably a really capable student in most areas, and also quite balanced. There is a defined sequential planning style. Mechanical is stronger, but not a massive difference. The higher the scores, the less important are small differences. If we have that level of score difference way down here, that might imply a more significant impact on what you see in the individual, but at high levels, small differences in scores tend to be less noticeable. So essentially they're quite balanced, and the implication of a high spatial and mechanical also suggests that they are practically oriented. And while they can learn theoretically, they probably also like to learn by hands-on work. So anything involved in projects, case studies, these kinds of things might suit their way of working. The key thing really with this presentation is that low verbal. Now, where's that come from? Is it because their English is a second language and haven't told us? Is it because they took a while to settle into the profiling and just didn't do particularly well on one of the two verbal reasoning assessments? Or could it be a true reflection of who they are, and that they've never really focused too much on the nuance in vocabulary and paid too much attention to how words are categorized? And they learn better from numbers and pictures and shapes and practical experience. We don't know. We could of course ask them, but the profile at the moment is very strongly defined technical commercial. That's what these three here, that pattern suggests. Profile is also practical, and put these together and you have a series of careers down here. Mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, mechatronics, civil engineering, whole range of things like that probably suit them well. Could be areas of finance, but highly practical people tend on the whole to be drawn to things which have a mechanical component to them, so that's why I'm focusing more on the engineering side. When we look at the interests, we have the reason why perhaps they didn't do well in the verbal, just not interested in communicating with people by writing or speaking. And this might say a lot about how they learn and the subjects they relate to, the teacher's style that they relate to best. Now, this strong interest in computers and also in numbers and engineering and technology, plus transport and building, all kind of sit together in a group in my mind. And it's not surprising that interest in things in general is high and interest in people is lower. It tends to be one or the other for a lot of students. Now, we can go into the detail behind these 10 scores, and this wheel is clickable. I think technology is practical, or let's say technology is the biggest. If you click here, you can see that maybe civil's a touch lower, maybe electrical, but maybe mechanical's the strongest, but pretty much there's no real difference. They're interested in working with things in general. Okay, now a quick look at personality. Not a huge amount to be said here. The longer the line either side of this central bar, the stronger the preference to work in that way or to behave in that way. So nothing really strongly stands out here. They do come out as the motivator, and there's more of a description down the bottom here. I wouldn't tend to go into personality in too much detail with students unless you have a lot of time and feel confident in doing this. I tend to focus on aptitudes and interests more than personality, certainly initially in the discussion. Now, moving on to the careers, which is under my choices, we have a list of Moresby's suggestions. Everybody gets a dozen, as you know. Now, these assume an academic attainment level as described here. These will be state specific if you're not in Victoria, and you can adjust the different levels. So you wouldn't really in this case, because they seem to fit quite well with the student. But if you said, okay, well, this student doesn't want to attempt a degree, and they may well want to leave education earlier rather than later, we might say, well, they still get an ATAR, but let's pop that down, say full-time employment, possibly with a focus on an apprenticeship if are these routes available in these areas. And what you see is they're getting a whole different set of careers depending on the level of academic attainment that person's looking for. So I'll just return these to where we were, and feel free to change these. Aptitude assessments are just not a great predictor of academic attainment. They're not taking into account personal motivation, quality teaching, luck on the day of the exam, etc. So if it doesn't feel right, or just if you want to explore differences, just go ahead and do that. The other thing you can do here is you can click on the individual careers, find out a little bit more about them. So if we look at civil engineering, there is an overview, some media to watch, information on academic routes and in work, what tends to happen, the kind of hours of work involved, and information on entry routes with some suggestions around senior secondary subjects. So when we look at this, the thicker lines are the freeways or the motorways. They're the route taken by most students. That's described here. And we do have specific subjects which are seen to be useful. But this list is not as precise as a specific university's list about assumed knowledge or prerequisites would be, so it's more guidance than a specific tight list. Down below we have related careers and a list of resources. And you can favourite careers from here if you wish. So if this individual was interested in civil engineering, they just click on the heart, close this down, and that career would appear at the top. And you can favourite from the list as well. Now if you are sitting with a student and they say, yeah, I quite like the sound of that, always favourite it. It's a record of what's gone on in the interview, and when students come back to this information in a year or two's time, at least they'd have a record of where their thoughts were. Now the other thing you can do with this list of careers is you can change the focus on and what if options. Now you probably wouldn't with this student because it all seems fairly clear, but you might say, well, what if we focus on your aptitudes? How do the career suggestions change? And you'll see here very few new careers have joined the list, only 2 have pushed their way in. If I turn that off to go back to the default and turn on the interests, what you see is really no difference at all. So for this student, we're finding the aptitude pattern and the interests are very much in alignment, which of course is a positive thing. So assuming discussion ends there, you don't need to go into too much detail at year 10 in whether they become an environmental engineer or an aeronautical engineer. It's going to be similar in terms of subjects. So the thing you probably would do with this student is go off and have a look at senior secondary subjects. I don't think there'll be any massive surprises here that, given their personality, interest and aptitudes, it's going to be the sciences which come to the top. And students can click on these, find out what they're about, and say, yes, I like the sound of that. There's a space up here for the person running the system at school, your certified user, to add in some text, maybe a link to school curriculum information. Now, pretty much all the subjects in your state or territory will be listed here, but it's quite normal to untick many of the careers behind the scenes, so they're not shown to students. So if you go to the bottom, there is a search box, and if they can't find a subject they're interested in, here I'll just type in vet, and we find one which is unticked. They could select that. You might have 40 down here that are unticked, and that will appear at the top as chosen. So though they're not presented, we're not stopping students selecting them if they know what they're looking for. So for this student, it's likely to be physics in Victoria, maths methods, and possibly chemistry, and they may well go for specialist maths. They're certainly capable of it. What we don't do is we don't force in English or anything else, so I'll have to go a long way down to find an English subject which suits them. And here we go. Now it seems fairly clear for this student the Moresby profile should really be doing 2 things for them. One, it should be a confirmation that their interests line up with their aptitudes. It's always a nice thing to know. And secondly, from a school perspective, there's a very low risk of getting it wrong in terms of their subject options. There is always the argument about whether they take specialist maths or not, which will be one, obviously you'll go through at school. But other than this, it's giving the student an opportunity to click through the different career areas and maybe broaden their horizons in terms of what might suit them. Have they thought about environmental engineering or mechatronics? And what about building services engineering? What is that nowadays? Mining engineering, how bright is the future? These are all things which a student might want to think about before they embark on a degree course. And the idea behind all of this is there should be a spark for them to say, what if in terms of looking at the future options, and also an opportunity to start doing research and recording that information. That's all. Thank you.